I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Rise of Myths Cthulhu from Synergic Games. Rise of Myths Cthulhu is a 1-to-3 player roguelike deck building game. It also makes me wonder if there'll be other Rise of Myths games that are not Cthulhu, because the name thing over there. Anyways, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. And I will note two things before going through this. The first is that, while I did give the prototype disclaimer, I should note this is more so a prototype than many games I cover that are prototypes, in the sense that as a roguelike game, this prototype doesn't actually have the roguelike constant development. This is, what I have in front of me is a one-shot game with a partial scenario and wouldn't be the full experience. Which does mean that my feedback is only based off of my feedback, my review, thoughts, and opinions is only based on the prototype I have access to and not the full experience. I do believe they have access to the open TTS, if I'm not mistaken, if anyone wants to go ahead and dive in and see this game for themselves. But that's kind of, I guess, the initial disclaimer is this is very much a prototype, which we'll get to again throughout this review, especially in my final thoughts. The other disclaimer is, please note, this game is done with AI-generated artwork. You can go ahead and check out the crowdfunding campaign for their full statement on it, as far as how and the methods used and all of that. But in case that's something that is a deal breaker for you, I just want to make sure you're informed going into it. And with that, let's go ahead and talk about the game, and then my thoughts and opinions, links and timestamps to everything down below. Starting off with the game, this is a roguelike deck builder. What does that mean, roguelite? The general idea is that this game has a degree of failing forward, so to speak. You're going to go through the game. Your general idea is you are going to be on this little map over here. You're going to be moving your token around, interacting with both fights as well as other elements, shops, portals, and then eventually the great old one you're trying to defeat over there. This isn't a spot we're trying to get to. This is a set aside card. But you have this little mini map you'll be wandering through. You can add cards to it as needed to be able to go from one card to the next and move around, and you'll have various encounters tracking the level of what encounter you're currently up to. That's your little side map progression system. Outside of that, the most common thing you're going to be doing is you're going to be engaging in fights. You have little encounters over here, you take your token, you're going to have a little fight over there, and when you're done, you'll mark it as, you know, that's your little 1 on the spot. We'll go to there, have another fight, mark it as 2 before moving off to the next board over there. So you have a little map that's tracking your episodes, as it were. As far as the individual episodes, the main thing you're ultimately trying to do is to deal with the Great Old One and defeat them, or sometimes to just survive the Great Old One. Surviving is often enough to stop them from coming into this world, but then there's going to be the next game where you can go ahead and try to actually take them down instead. To that end, you're going to have a deck building system where you're going to start by looking at which combat encounter you're up to. Over here, we're playing as a 2-player game right now, so we set up for 2 players with this card. Phase 1, meaning this initial combat, we'll take this off to not confuse you, is going to have 2 common minions, 2 commons, and a minion. So we're going to go to our common deck, we're going to grab 2 commons, and then we're going to grab a minion. And I'm going to show you how a basic fight goes through, but this is kind of the general arc of what you'd be playing through. We're going to order them based off of their initiative over here, so we're going to place them out over here. These are the enemies we're fighting through. We have these 3 enemies to fight against, and there's going to be rounds of combat. On these cards, you have the health, you have the initiative, you have who they target, and then you have how much damage they're dealing, as well as what other things are they doing, which can be defense, it can be nothing, or sometimes they're going to be dealing various negative effects to you as the players. So right now, we have these 3 enemies, and round 1 is the first column. So right now, the only thing we're concerned with is round 1. Once we survive round 1, or die, well, I guess if we die, it's over, but if we survive round 1, we're going to be going to round 2, where the second column is going to matter more. So for example, this Undertaker over here is doing 3 defense in that first round, but they're only doing 1 damage. So if we can defend against that 1 damage, then that will be enough to go to round 2, where we can just focus on killing him without worrying about the defense. If you've played games like Slay the Spire, this kind of concept, Slay the Spire, the video game or the board game, this kind of concept will be very familiar to you. I'm going to go ahead and draw 1 hand of cards. I'm not going to go through a full combat, but I'll show you how this plays out. But before I do, let's talk about the arc. So the arc of the game, you have this mini-map, you have these combats. Once you're in a combat, you'll be drawing cards from your deck in order to take down the enemies. When you're done with a combat, you're going to add cards from your personal deck. You have these personal decks over here with tons of cards. You're going to draw 3 cards. You're going to add 1 to your deck, and that's going to give you a degree of development that's going on in the game. Your deck is getting better within the game as you play it. You'll also be earning money that you can spend at a shop when you get to a shop location. So there's a little card over here showing you the various things you can get, again, trying to prep yourself for better success. And the reason for that is once you hit a certain point, you can confront the Great Old One. Generally, the arc of the game is you don't have to confront them right away. There's a point where you'll have to confront them, but until then, there's a little bit of wiggle room where you could confront them, or you could keep trying to power up through smaller fights. At which point, you'll go fight the Great Old One, and each of the Great Old Ones, I only have one in this prototype, but each of the Great Old Ones gives you a slightly different spin as to how they work, but they are much, much stronger than individual enemies. Win or lose the game, not just the Great Old One's fight, because you might lose before you get to the Great Old One, but win or lose, you're going to walk away with a certain amount of progress. That progress can be utilized to build yourself up better from game to game. So you walk into your very first game a certain way, and then you walk into subsequent games hopefully stronger, assuming you've gotten any progress done along the way. It's important to note that that is an element that I do not have in this prototype and have not been able to play through. So I know that exists as a concept within the game, but I can't give my feedback on that long-term progression, and we'll talk more about that when I get specific elements of my thoughts and opinions. But the general arc is you fight, you almost certainly lose your first combats, you get more powerful, and you get to a point where you eventually can take down the Great Old Ones in this game. That is the idea of the roguelite deck building, as far as the individual combat mechanics, as far as how those work. So you're going to have a few things going on for your characters. You're going to have your class relic, which is always in play. If you're playing a 2 or 3 player game, you're going to have your synergy relics. Actually, it might be a 2 player only, but you have your synergy relics. And if you're playing solo, you will instead have your class items that you'll be able to utilize instead. These are things you can unlock in the roguelike aspect, but alternatively, you start with them in a solo game to give you a small bit of a boost. But for right now, then we have our deck over here. Our deck, we're going to draw 6 cards from, and I'm only going to take a turn with one of these characters just to show you how a turn will play out. There are full playthroughs you can take a look at. I believe Rolling Solo has a playthrough, if I'm not mistaken. You can check that out, but I'm just going to walk you through a basic round of combat. So right now, we have 2 attack and 2 defense, and we have this on multiple enemies. Keeping in mind that right now, because I'm set up as a 2-player game, this other player would also be able to go ahead and be mindful of their cards and how they're going to contribute. So when you see me not being able to do enough to stop them from destroying me, that's okay, because technically there's a second player at play. Up at the top left corner is the cost for a card, but it's also what you can discard to generate energy to pay for cards. So I have a bunch of these cards over here. I want to take out this one over here is tricky. Characters attacked by it lose a sanity. I don't want to lose a sanity. Let's see if I can take out this guy, because he has the lowest defense. He has 5 health, but I want to take him out before he gets to his higher defenses over here. So if I play this card over here, it's going to cost me 2, so I'll discard. Do I have any defensive cards? I do. I'm not playing defensively at all right now. I'm going to discard this, and I'm going to go through this quickly. I'm not going to try to optimize right now. I'm trying to show you how it plays. I'm discarding this to pay for this. This will generate 2 energy. I'll have my 2 over there. Attack 2, add attack 1 if the enemy is defending. So this enemy would have a defense of 1, so the first attack hits that, the second attack hits him, and he goes down by 2 wounds over here. So now he's 2 wounds, he has 5 health remaining, he has 3 health remaining. I still have other cards that I have to try to think through how to play over here. We have attack 2 and defense 2, lose a sanity. This could be helpful because currently I'm being hit by 3 attack over there. So let's see if I can do that. I don't think I'm going to be able to take him out. Maybe I could. Here, we'll play this card over here. We'll discard this card in order to pay for this card over here. I'm going to lose a sanity, so I'm playing this card. I'm going to lose 1 sanity over here, so I need to be mindful of that. Sanity is something that's going to slowly go down through the course of the game, and if you run out of sanity or health, that's going to trigger the end game. That's going to trigger you losing. But right now I get to attack 2 and defend 2. So I have defense 2 on my character. I can grab some of this to indicate that, and I attack him again for another 2 damage. He only has 1 damage left. I'll then discard one of these cards, a 1 for a 1. It's also important to note energy is stored, so you could discard a 2 and pay for 2 ones. It doesn't have to be 1 card for 1. And I'll play this card, attack 1, add 1 attack for each weakness the enemy has. They don't have any weakness, so I'm just going to add 1 more attack and take him out. Now I've taken this character out. This parasite's gone. We can put him back into his little stack over here, technically be shuffled or discard pile or all that. But I have these 2 characters remaining who are now going to attack me. They're going to attack me for 3 damage, which fortunately I have 2 defense, so I could ignore the first 2 damage, but I will take a wound and put it on my character. Again, keeping in mind that technically I have a full other player over here who would be helping me and almost certainly taking out one of those along the way. And that's because the first combat starts off pretty easy. Combats are going to escalate. As you go to multiple combats, you're going to have more and more stronger enemies attacking you until eventually you take down the Great Old One. Speaking of the Great Old One has an entirely separate combat mechanic. Again, this is the prototype Great Old One. It's not the same as the endgame one. But effectively, you have to survive 6 rounds against the Great Old One, and Cthulhu is going to be dealing out 2 curse cards per player that will hopefully, well, not hopefully, as I say hopefully, kill the player, but you don't want that. These 2 curse cards per player will be trying to kill the player. They have a health on them that you need to be mindful of, they have abilities on them, and then they have the damage they're dealing. But then most importantly, and the thing that usually gets me when I play this, is they have these in the top left corner. For every curse card you don't defeat, if I defeat this after a round of combat, he'll still be dealing 2 new curse cards next next round, he'll still be dealing 2 new attack cards. His curse card is actually going to be a separate curse over here that is in play. If an enemy deals damage, it deals 1 additional damage to the same target. This is a curse that's going to be played, and on alternate rounds, he's going to be recovering. But this little marker over here is going to contribute to his strength, and if he gets to 6 of that, well, we're going to lose, and he's going to kill me, and that's usually how I end up losing this game when I play it. But that's trying to give you a general short idea of how Cthulhu works. Each Elder God has their own approach for how they attack you and the challenges they'll face. I only have this one in the prototype. That's kind of what's going on here as far as how you play this game. I only walked you through 1 round of combat. Obviously, that combat would have continued until eventually they died or I died. And in that first round, you're pretty safe. You're not going to die. The problem is your health and your sanity carries over from combat round to combat round all the way until you get up to the Great Old One, which means you need to be mindful of every single thing you lose. Because if you thought Cthulhu was hard, it's harder when you have 4 health gone and 3 sanity lost, and you're still trying to take him out. Ultimately, in this game, you can usually get to Cthulhu. It's winning Cthulhu that's the hard part, at least in the prototype I have here so far. That's the general idea of most of the elements of the game. There's a lot of small things to get into, a lot of small little details as far as how things work, anything from setup to the cards you're adding, to the way the map works, to what happens when a map doesn't align. There's a lot of small things, but that's a general arc of how to play Rise of Myths Cthulhu from Synergy Games. Which brings me to my review, starting off with going through what I like, don't like, and see others not liking, starting off with what I like. And the first one is going to be controversial, and it's tough here because my choices are I can simply avoid telling you something I like, or I could get into it, controversial aspects and all. And the controversial aspect is I like the art in this game, and it is done with some degree of AI to it. Again, they have a whole statement on the process, you can go through it. I will say most of the time when I see AI in games, or AI art in games, I'm usually not a fan of the end product, but there certainly have been exceptions. There have been times where AI art was part of a process that resulted in artwork that I did enjoy, and I do enjoy the artwork in this game. I think the art looks great. I understand it's still going to be a sensitive point for anyone who's in any way against AI, which is why I'm trying to be as transparent as possible about the usage, or even about my opinion despite the usage. But with that part out of the way, the less controversial aspects is it's a deck builder, and it's a roguelite game. Those are both good things on their own, but the more important part is how this implements those. And I obviously can't comment on the roguelite aspects. The deck building process and journey, though, I have had fun with. I've enjoyed playing through the characters. I think I've played through 3 out of the 4 characters. I've been in games with all 4 characters, but I've personally played as 3 out of the 4 characters, and the characters do feel different. The decks they have, of which, again, I only have partial decks. At the end of each combat, you would reveal 3 new cards and add one of those cards to that investigator's deck. And that lets you build your character, giving you new abilities or tweaking the way your character is going to play through the game, slowly but surely as you go through it. Which again, I'm getting a smaller experience of that because the normal arc is designed to be a longer set of going through like 14 encounters, something like that, and this particular prototype only brings you up till 7, and Cthulhu is appropriately buffed to make sure he's balanced for those 7 scenarios. He's hard, but theoretically winnable. But in general, the roguelite aspect, the tableau, the deck building aspect, the building your deck as you go through it, the getting stronger, the combination of the synergies of playing for cards using other cards. I love that in games like Marvel Champions, games like Primal that do that. I love the being given a full hand of cards and having to choose how to utilize those combinations. Which things are you going to use? Which things are you going to not? Are you playing more defensively to survive? Are you playing more offensively to take people out? And every encounter is going to be different. From the various encounters you go through each minion or minion servants, commons, all the various level of enemies. Again, my prototype only has a few levels. There are actually more levels. I believe there's elites as well in the full game. But all of that is going to be a different challenge. Facing off against Cthulhu's attacks over there, that's a whole different level of how to play because you need to take them out. You can't afford to play defensively because that's the thing that's slowly ticking up the clock, making you lose. And so the deck building part, I like. The roguelite aspect, I theoretically like. Hard to say until I say it. The roles feeling different between the different characters you're playing as, I like that. The fact that you can pay for cards with other cards. The true cooperative play. There's an element in the game I didn't talk about, but there's an element where you can play a card for another player, so you can actually have a level of strong cooperation. Not just cooperation against the enemies, but actively helping each other through the cards you play. Or the way you play solo. There's two-handed solo, which you can do, but this is one of those few games where I actually prefer playing true solo. Usually with games like this, I prefer two-handed solo. This one I prefer true solo because they do balance it around those aspects. So you can play a two-handed, you can play a two-player, you can play a three-player, or you can play a true solo, which I've enjoyed doing as well. well. So it's good for true cooperative, it's good for true solo. There's adjustable difficulty in the game. The game gives you different levels of adjustable difficulty in the rules if you are having too easy or too hard of a time. And I'd say the general arc of the game I like as well. It's very reminiscent of games like Too Many Bones, where the individual encounters you have do feel like a puzzle. They do feel challenging as you go through them, but ultimately that's not where you usually lose the game. Those individual roles are about how you can min-max your way through it, losing as little as possible, so that when you face off against that great old one, you are best primed to actually take him out and win. And I like that arc because it means I don't constantly get slapped down the whole time. Even when I lose the game, I was able to feel powerful the whole way through, and then in the end, I either win or lose depending on how well I was able to build myself up. So that kind of arc, I like it in games like, well, primarily, like I said, Too Many Bones, or Slay the Spire, again, both digitally and physically. So overall, there's a lot of good things that this game is doing. As far as things I don't like in the game, there's going to be two things, one relative to the prototype part. The first part, I'll say that I felt from the rulebook that there are a lot of rules relative to how complex this game is. Meaning, for the most part, this is a fairly straightforward deck-building games with roguelike progression. There's not a ton of complexity to what's actually happening here, and yet the rulebook was incredibly long with a lot of... It was a very long rulebook to get through as far as the sheer amount of extra things being added. I don't know if there's a way to compress that, but I feel the rulebook's complexity makes it feel this complex, and you still have to go through the rulebook, so you have to read it all, but the actual core structure of the game, the core structure is so much more distilled. I don't know if it's all these edge cases or detail, I don't know what it is that lends itself to that, but I felt that the core structure is incredibly straightforward, and there's a lot of extras that add to just how easy it is to initially onboard for this game. And it's going to be relevant, not going to be relevant for teaching others as much as long as you're present, because you can deal with the core structure, get them up and running, and then deal with all the edge cases as you go, but it is certainly relevant for learning the game. I'll say that, and this next complaint is more relative to the fact that this is a prototype that doesn't give me the full experience, but the early game has felt a little repetitive and slow to build up. Because of the fact that you're dealing with one card being added per encounter, and again, especially in the prototype over here, you only have 4 to 6 encounters before the old one, means by the time you get to the old one, you're dealing with a deck that has, 12 cards. The end game of this, you have 12 cards from your starting deck, and then you have maybe 6 cards you've added, usually less than that, and so it still is mostly your starting cards. There's not a lot of iteration, and if you dive back into it, you're starting again from scratch with those same 12 standard cards and a slow progression as far as how you're going to be adding or tweaking out your character and what's being added to it. So this is something where I'd say that the first game was very, very charming. Subsequent games felt a little bit less charming, especially when playing as the same character. Playing as a new character still feels fun. Playing as the same character feels like you're still working your way towards slow progression that isn't as frequent as I would like, at least not in this prototype. The problem is that's something specific to the prototype. I don't know what the final game will be like in terms of the actual roguelike progression, or even in terms of the longer progression that gives you more of the end game and less of the build-up phase as far as ratios go. So my biggest complaint past the initial onboarding is something that I think is relevant to the prototype and not the final game, or at least less so the final game, but I can't comment on that until I play the final game. The best I can do is give you my thoughts and experience so far. As far as I can see others not liking, there's a lot of token management in this game. Not a ton, but there's definitely a lot of token management. Even the characters you're going to be lining up, you're going to be frequently adding and adjusting the tokens. Conditions only last till the end of the round, which could be another thing you don't like, that conditions don't really last, forever. They don't last the whole round of combat. If you weaken an enemy, as soon as he attacks, the weakening's gone. Again, this is common to other games, but there's a lot of adjusting tokens on yourself, on the enemies, and just managing all of that. I believe some things, again, will be different in the final game, but for the most part, there still will be token tracking going on in this game. As far as final thoughts, and it's hard to call it final thoughts. It's not a first impression because I've played this a bunch. It's not final thoughts because I don't feel I got the full experience, so it's final thoughts on a prototype. It's final thoughts on a prototype over here. I really like Rise of Myths. I like the gameplay. I like the arc of it. I've had fun going through it. I liked it from the very first time I played it. I immediately was charmed by it. I like games like this, and I like this implementation within the game. This to me feels like it's being like an Arkham horror card game style game, but with a much more of a focus on direct conflict, much more focus on just being able to build up your deck and feeling powerful. Almost like a cross between, Cthulhu Death May Die and Arkham Horror the card game, putting out this instead. I really enjoy the overall structure of everything going on here, and I think that I'll like the final game even more because the biggest complaints I have are based on me basically trying to play multiple times through a partial game. It's a partial game. It's not a full game. This is meant to be a preview, a prototype. It's not going to be the final experience, and it very much comes through in the limited components, limited cards, limited enemies, limited Elder Ones, limited progression. It's kind of reviewing a roguelike deck building game where a big part of the game is theoretically there and not actually there. So for me, I am coming in at a 4 out of 5. Even with all that uncertainty around the future, even as is, I've had fun with this. This is a lot of fun to go through. I do think it's higher for me. I think it's easily a 4.5 based on what I've seen so far. Deck like, again, it's very easy. Setup and maintenance and management, very easy. Deck building roguelite with multiple characters that all feel different. All of that sounds great, and I'm very excited for the rest of that. The problem is that's not something I've gotten to play. It's something I'm excited about for the future. So in its current state, it's a 4 out of 5. I think that will be higher when I actually get to properly play the game. As far as other game recommendations, I've thrown out a bunch of names that I'm going to throw out again right now. The Slay the Spire is obviously going to be one. This very much felt reminiscent to the general arc of Slay the Spire, while being very different. One of the biggest challenges I have with Slay the Spire is sometimes I just want to play the video game and not the board game. There is no video game, so this solves that problem. And then outside of that, if you're looking for the Cthulhu mythos, definitely check out Arkham Horror the card game, or Cthulhu Death May Die, of which, like I said already, this feels like a kind of hybrid between those two. A card-based system like Arkham Horror the card game, but with more direct conflict and fighting like Cthulhu Death May Die. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.